Kim Tae-ho wiped the grease from his hands as he finished, checking the air filters on level 7 of the orbital mining station. The work was simple but important. Without clean air flowing through the station, the 300 workers living here would suffocate in space. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, and it never got exciting. The mining station orbited Earth at a safe distance, pulling precious metals from asteroids that drifted too close to the planet. Taeho's job was to keep all the machines running smoothly. He fixed broken pumps, replaced worn cables, and made sure the life support systems never failed. It was honest work, but nothing special. He was 28 years old, average height, with calloused hands and a quiet manner. Most people barely noticed him when he walked through the station corridors. He liked it that way. No drama, no complications, just steady work and a paycheck that he sent home to his girlfriend Park Hae-jin on Earth. Hae-jin worked as a teacher in Seoul. She was smart, beautiful, and patient enough to wait for him while he worked in space. They had been together for 3 years, and Tae-ho was saving money to buy her a ring. In 2 more years, he would have enough credits to return to Earth and start a normal life with her. His best friend, Lee Dong-wook, worked on the same station as a communications officer. They had grown up in the same neighborhood and joined the space program together. Dong-wook was louder and more outgoing than Tae-ho, always making jokes and trying to get the other workers to laugh. He kept Tae-ho from getting too lonely during the long months in space. On this particular Tuesday morning, Tae-ho was crawling through a maintenance tunnel when the station's emergency alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed in the narrow space, and his radio crackled to life. "All personnel report to emergency stations immediately," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez, the station commander. "This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations." Now Tae-ho quickly backed out of the tunnel and ran toward the main observation deck. Other workers were running too, their faces confused and worried. Emergency drills happened every month, but never on a Tuesday morning, and never with this much panic in the captain's voice. The observation deck had huge windows that looked out at Earth and the surrounding space. When Tae-ho arrived, he could see why everyone was afraid. Massive ships hung in the darkness around Earth like sleeping giants. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built, each one the size of a small city. Their surfaces were smooth and silver, reflecting the light from Earth's sun. "What are those things?" whispered Maria Santos, one of the engineers. She stood next to Tae-ho, staring at the alien vessels. "I don't know," Tae-ho replied, but his heart was beating fast. Everyone knew that humans had never made contact with alien life. These ships meant that everything was about to change. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers again. "Attention all personnel. We have received a message from the unknown vessels. They claim to be peaceful and wish to communicate with Earth's government. We are to remain at our posts and await further instructions." For the next 6 hours, Tae-ho tried to work normally, but it was impossible to concentrate. The alien ships just sat there, not moving, not attacking, just waiting. News reports from Earth showed similar ships appearing over every major city on the planet. The aliens had arrived everywhere at once. Finally, at 1400 hours, all the screens on the station switched to an emergency broadcast. A figure appeared that made everyone gasp. It was clearly not human, but it was beautiful in a strange way. The being had pale blue skin, silver hair that moved like water, and eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. It wore robes that shifted color from deep purple to midnight blue. "People of Earth," the alien said in perfect English, though its lips did not quite match the words. "I am High Matriarch Lyra Voss of the Valthani. We come to you in peace, but also in great need." The alien's voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Even though she was clearly not human, something about her seemed familiar and comforting. "Our people have traveled the stars for thousands of your years," she continued. "We have built great cities on distant worlds and learned the secrets of space and time. But we face extinction. Our genetic code has become too pure, too perfect. We can no longer reproduce successfully. Our children are born weak and die young." Tae-ho felt a chill run down his spine. He could see the sadness in the alien's glowing eyes. "We have searched the galaxy for a compatible species," Matriarch Voss said. "After many years, we have found you. Humans possess the genetic diversity we need to save our people. We ask for volunteers to help us continue our species. In return, we offer knowledge and technology that will advance your civilization by thousands of years." The broadcast continued for another 20 minutes. The matriarch explained that they would select only the most genetically suitable humans. These chosen individuals would live aboard the Valthani ships and help create hybrid offspring that could save both species. She promised that no one would be forced to participate, but the fate of an entire ancient civilization hung in the balance. When the message ended, the observation deck was silent. Everyone stared at the screens, trying to process what they had just heard. "They want to breed with us," Maria said quietly. "Not all of us," replied Dong-wook, who had joined them during the broadcast. "Only the ones they choose." Over the next 3 days, strange scanning beams swept across Earth and all the orbital stations. The beams were pale blue light that passed through walls and buildings as if they were made of glass. Tahoe felt the beam pass over him twice while he was working. It felt warm and tingly like standing in summer sunshine. The Valthani announced that their selection process was complete. They had chosen exactly 1,000 humans from around the world. These individuals would be transported to the alien ships within 24 hours. Tahoe was fixing a water recycler when Captain Rodriguez found him. Tahoe, the captain said, his face grave. I need to speak with you privately. They went to the captain's office, where Rodriguez handed Tahoe a data pad with an official seal from Earth's government. You've been selected, the captain said simply. The aliens want you. Tahoe stared at the pad, unable to believe what he was reading. His name was there in official letters, along with instructions to report to Docking Bay 3 in 2 hours. A Valthani shuttle would take him to their mothership. But I'm nobody, Tahoe said. I'm just a mechanic. There are scientists here, officers, people much more important than me. Captain Rodriguez shook his head. Apparently the aliens don't see it that way. They scanned everyone and you're one of the ones they want. I'm sorry, Tahoe, you don't have a choice in this. The next 2 hours passed like a bad dream. Tahoe packed his few belongings while Dongwook helped him. His friend tried to make jokes, but his eyes were red with tears he refused to shed. Take care of yourself up there, Dongwook said as they hugged goodbye. And don't forget about us little people when you're flying around the galaxy. Tahoe called hygiene on Earth. She cried when he told her the news, but she was brave enough to wish him well. Come back to me, she whispered through the video link. Promise me you'll find a way to come back. I promise, Tahoe said, though he had no idea if he could keep that promise. At Docking Bay 3, Tahoe found 12 other people waiting with their bags. Some were crying, others looked excited, and a few seemed as confused as he felt. There was Dr. Choi Myung, a geneticist from the Seoul National University Research Station. There was also Kong Jae-soon, a former military officer who now worked security on Lunar Base. When the Valthani shuttle arrived, it was like nothing Tahoe had ever seen. It moved without sound, its surface rippling like liquid metal. The door opened with a soft musical tone, and warm light spilled out. A tall Valthani stepped out to greet them. Like the matriarch, this one had blue skin and silver hair, but its eyes were darker and its robes were simple white. Welcome, chosen ones, it said in the same musical voice. I am Navigator Kith. Please, come aboard. Your new life begins now. As Tahoe stepped into the alien ship, he wondered what he had done to deserve this strange fate. He was just an ordinary man with ordinary skills. But somehow, the most advanced race in the galaxy had looked at all of humanity and decided they needed him. The shuttle door closed behind them, and Tahoe felt the ship begin to move. Through the transparent walls, he watched his home station grow smaller until it was just another point of light in the darkness. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. The inside of the Valthani mothership was unlike anything Tahoe had ever imagined. The walls seemed to be made of living light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. The floors were soft under his feet, not hard metal like human ships. Everything curved in smooth flowing lines that made him feel like he was walking inside a giant shell. Navigator Kith led the group of 13 selected humans through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Other Valthani passed them, tall and graceful beings who moved with the fluid motion of dancers. Their clothes changed colors as they walked, shifting from blue to green to silver like the surface of a deep ocean. Where are you taking us? Asked Dr. Choi Myung. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying genetics. Even now, surrounded by impossible alien technology, she was taking notes on a small tablet. To your quarters first, Navigator Kith replied, then to meet the High Matriarch. She wishes to speak with each of you personally. The quarters they were given were more like luxury hotel rooms than prison cells. Each person had a large space with a bed that adjusted to their body, walls that could display any image they wanted, and a bathroom with water that felt better than any shower on Earth. Tahoe sat on his bed and stared out the window at the stars, trying to understand what was happening to him. After a few hours, Navigator Kith came to collect him. They walked through more corridors until they reached a chamber that took Tahoe's breath away. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that showed the swirling colors of a nebula. In the center sat High Matriarch Lyra Voss on what looked like a throne made of crystallized starlight. Up close, she was even more beautiful and strange than she had appeared on the broadcast. Her skin had a faint glow, and her silver hair moved as if it was underwater. But it was her eyes that captured Tahoe's attention. They were ancient eyes, eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. Kim Tahoe, she said, and somehow hearing his name in her musical voice made him shiver. Please, sit with me. A chair rose from the floor near her throne. Tahoe sat down carefully, feeling very small and ordinary next to this magnificent being. You are wondering why you were chosen, the matriarch said. It was not a question. Yes, Tahoe replied. I am nobody special. I fix machines. I have no education, no important skills. There must be a mistake. The matriarch smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. There is no mistake, Kim Tahoe. But first, let me tell you why we are here. She stood and gestured to the walls, which suddenly showed images of incredible alien cities, towers that reached into the clouds, bridges that spanned between planets, ships that could destroy stars. Long ago, my people ruled a vast empire, she said. We conquered worlds, built wonders that lasted for millennia. We thought ourselves perfect, the pinnacle of evolution. In our pride, we began to breed only with those who shared our best traits. The images changed to show Valthani children, but these were different from the adults Tejo had seen. They were pale and weak, some barely able to walk. Our genetic purity became our curse, the matriarch continued. Each generation became weaker. Our children began to die in infancy. Our birth rate dropped until we could barely replace those we lost to old age. We realized too late that diversity, not purity, is the key to survival. Tejo watched the sad images and felt genuine sympathy for these proud beings. How many of you are left? Perhaps 50,000 across all our ships, he said. Once we numbered in the billions. We searched the galaxy for a species compatible with our genetics. Most races we found were too different, others were too similar to our own degraded bloodline, but humans... Bhi. She paused and looked directly at him. Humans are perfect. The walls now showed DNA sequences that meant nothing to Tejo, but the matriarch explained them anyway. Human genetics are wonderfully chaotic, she said. You carried the genetic memory of your entire evolutionary history. You have not bred yourselves into a corner as we did. Your diversity makes you strong, but why me? Tejo asked again instead of answering. The matriarch called for someone named Dr. Nix Thorne. A moment later, another Valthani entered the chamber. This one was taller and thinner than the others, with skin that was more silver than blue, and eyes like bright stars. Dr. Thorne is our chief geneticist, the matriarch explained. She has been studying the humans we selected. Tell him what you found. Dr. Thorne activated a device that projected a three-dimensional image of DNA into the air. Tejo recognized it as human DNA, but there were sections that glowed with different colors. Your genetic code is remarkable, Dr. Thorne said in a voice like distant thunder. Most humans carry traces of ancient genetic material, but you... She manipulated the image, zooming in on the glowing sections. These sequences do not match any known Earth-based lifeforms. Tejo stared at the floating DNA. What does that mean? It means, the matriarch said softly, that you are not entirely human. The room seemed to spin around. Tejo, that is impossible. My parents are human. My grandparents were human. My family has lived in Korea for generations. Yes, Dr. Thorne said, but somewhere in your bloodline, someone was touched by something not of Earth. These genetic markers are very old, perhaps hundreds of generations, but they are there and they are active. The matriarch sat back down and leaned forward. You were not chosen just for breeding. Kim Tejo, you and the others carry something we thought was lost forever. Something that might save not just our species, but many others as well. Over the next few days, Tejo learned more about his fellow selected humans. Dr. Myung had been chosen because her brain could process information at incredible speeds when given the right stimulation. During tests, she solved mathematical problems that stumped Valthani computers. Kong Jae-sung turned out to have perfect spatial awareness. He could navigate the ship's complex corridors without getting lost, even in sections he had never seen before. More impressive, he could sense the ship's position in space relative to the stars, something that should have been impossible without instruments. Each of the 13 humans had similar hidden abilities that only became apparent under Valthani testing. Some could sense electromagnetic fields, others could predict mechanical failures before they happened. One woman could actually see ultraviolet light with her naked eyes. What are we? Tejo asked Dr. Thorne during one of his sessions. We upped. Not entirely sure, she admitted, but we believe your ancestors were visited by members of an ancient race we call the progenitors. They were the first sapient species in this galaxy, and they spread across the stars long before my people or yours evolved. What happened to them? Dr. Thorne's star-bright eyes dimmed with sadness. They vanished. All we know of them comes from ruins and artifacts scattered across dead worlds. Some say they transcended physical existence. Others believe they were destroyed by some great enemy. But before they disappeared, they seem to have left genetic gifts on many worlds. And you think humans carry these gifts? Not all humans, she said. But some bloodlines show clear signs of progenitor influence. The genetic markers are usually dormant, but they can be activated under the right conditions. That night, as Tejo lay in his strange alien bed, he thought about his family back on Earth. His great-grandmother, Lee Sun-ya, had always told stories about lights in the sky and visitors from the stars. The family had thought she was just a superstitious old woman, but maybe her stories had been true. He thought about Haijun waiting for him on Earth, and Dong-wook working alone on the mining station. They seemed so far away now, like memories from another life. But even as his world changed around him, Tejo held on to the hope that somehow he could return to them. The matriarch had been kind to him, treating him with respect despite the vast difference in their ages and accomplishments. She was 800 years old and had ruled an interstellar empire while he was 28, and had never been further from home than Earth's orbit. yet she listened to his concerns and answered his questions with patience. "Why do you spend so much time with me?" he asked her one day as they walked through the ship's gardens. The plants here grew in impossible spirals and bloomed with flowers that sang soft melodies. "Because," she said, pausing to touch a flower that chimed like a bell, "you remind me of someone I lost long ago. A Valthani, no?" she said sadly. "One of the last progenitors we ever encountered. He had the same quiet strength you possess, the same way of seeing clearly through complexity to find simple truths." Taeho did not feel like he had any special strength or wisdom, but he was beginning to understand that his life had taken a turn toward something much larger than himself, whether he was ready or not. He was becoming part of a story that stretched across the galaxy and back through time to the very origins of intelligent life. That as he looked at the stars through the garden's transparent dome, Taeho wondered what other surprises awaited him in the vastness of space. 3 weeks had passed since Taeho arrived on the Valthani mothership, and strange things were beginning to happen to him. It started small. He would walk into a room and somehow know exactly how to operate machines he had never seen before. Alien symbols that should have been meaningless began to make sense, as if he was remembering a language he had forgotten long ago. The most disturbing change happened during his daily meetings with High Matriarch Lyra Voss. Sometimes, when she was speaking, he could hear her thoughts in his mind. Not words exactly, but feelings and images that she had not spoken aloud. The first time it happened, he thought he was going crazy. "You were troubled," the matriarch said during one of their walks through the ship's memory gardens. These were special places where the Valthani grew plants that held the genetic history of their people. Each flower and tree contained DNA samples from Valthani who had died over the centuries. "I think I am losing my mind," Taeho admitted. "I hear voices that are not there. I understand things I should not understand. Yesterday, I fixed a navigation computer by instinct alone. I have never studied space navigation in my life." The matriarch stopped walking and turned to face him. Her glowing eyes studied his face with concern. "The awakening has begun sooner than we expected. Dr. Thorne believed it would take months of exposure to our environment before your dormant genes became active." Awakening. Taeho felt a chill run down his spine. "The progenitor heritage in your bloodline is responding to our presence," she explained. "My people were created by the progenitors long ago, shaped by their science to be compatible with their technology and methods of communication. Being near us is triggering genetic memories that have slept in your DNA for countless generations." They continued walking while the matriarch explained more about the progenitors. According to Valthani records, they had been a race of extraordinary beings who could manipulate matter and energy with their minds. They had created many of the galaxy's sapient species, guiding evolution on thousands of worlds before vanishing into history. "But why did they disappear?" Taeho asked. "We believe they were preparing for a great threat," the matriarch said. "Ancient records speak of darkness between the stars, something that devoured entire worlds. The progenitors may have sacrificed themselves to stop it, or perhaps they found a way to escape to another dimension." That afternoon, Taeho met with Dr. Thorne for more genetic testing. The Valthani scientist had been studying his blood samples and brain scans, tracking the changes that were occurring in his body. "Your neural pathways are reorganizing themselves," she told him as she displayed colorful brain scans on the wall. "New connections are forming at an incredible rate. Your brain is becoming more like a progenitor brain." "Will I still be human?" Taeho asked, frightened by the implications. "You will be more than human," Dr. Thorne replied. "But whether you will still be yourself, that remains to be seen." The other selected humans were experiencing similar changes. Dr. Mi Young had begun solving complex mathematical equations in her sleep, waking up with formulas written in her own handwriting that she could not remember creating. Her processing speed had increased to the point where she could read entire books in minutes and remember every detail perfectly. Kong Jae-sung was developing abilities that went far beyond enhanced spatial awareness. He could now sense the location and movement of every person on the ship, even through solid walls. During combat training exercises, he could predict his opponent's moves before they made them, fighting with a precision that amazed even the Valthani warriors. But the changes were not without cost. Several of the selected humans were struggling with the mental strain of their expanding abilities. 2 had to be sedated when they began experiencing severe headaches and confusion. One woman named Park Sojin had developed the ability to see quantum probability fields, but the constant awareness of infinite possible futures was driving her toward madness. "We need to understand where these abilities come from," Dr. Myung said during one of their group meetings. Despite her enhanced intelligence, she remained grounded and practical. "If we can trace the genetic source, maybe we can control the awakening process." Taeho volunteered to let the Valthani researchers dig deeper into his family history. Using their advanced scanning technology, they examined genetic samples from his blood and compared them with databases of human DNA patterns from across Earth. What they found surprised everyone. The progenitor markers in Taeho's DNA were not randomly distributed. They were concentrated in specific sequences that could be traced back through his family line to a small village in Korea that had been destroyed during the Korean War. Your great-grandmother Lee Sunya, Dr. Thorne announced after days of analysis. She was the source. The genetic markers appear in her lineage and were passed down through your grandmother, then your mother, and finally to you. The matriarch was fascinated by this discovery. Can we learn more about this ancestor? The village records were destroyed during the war, Dr. Thorne said. But I have found something interesting in the geological surveys of the area. The soil around the village shows traces of elements that do not occur naturally on Earth. Alien elements, Tejo asked. Possibly. The concentration is consistent with the residue left by progenitor technology. Something happened in that village, something that left genetic changes in the local population. As if in response to learning about his heritage, Tejo's abilities began developing more rapidly. He could now communicate telepathically with several of the Valthani crew members, sharing thoughts and emotions as easily as speaking aloud. His understanding of their technology became intuitive, and he began helping their engineers solve problems that had puzzled them for years. The matriarch spent more and more time with him, teaching him about Valthani culture and history. She told him stories of the great wars that had shaped their empire, the beautiful worlds they had built, and the terrible loneliness that came with watching their people slowly fade into extinction. You give me hope, she told him one evening as they stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. For the first time in centuries, I believe our people might have a future. What about the breeding program? Tejo asked. Is that still necessary? The matriarch was quiet for a long moment. The genetic compatibility is still important, she said finally. But what we have discovered about the progenitor heritage changes everything. If we can fully awaken these abilities, in humans, we might be able to restore our own genetic vitality without hybrid offspring. And if we cannot, she turned to look at him, and he saw something in her ancient eyes that made his heart race. Then we will need to create a new kind of being, one that combines the best of both our species. Tejo was beginning to understand that his relationship with the matriarch was becoming more complicated than a simple arrangement between species. The telepathic bond they shared was growing stronger, and he often found himself experiencing her emotions as if they were his own. She was lonely, having lived for centuries without a true companion, and he was far from home and everything familiar. But there were also practical concerns. The other Valthani crew members were beginning to react strangely to Tejo's presence. Some treated him with reverence, as if he was becoming something sacred. Others seemed afraid, whispering among themselves about the changes they observed in him. They fear what I am becoming, Tejo told Dr. Myung during one of their private conversations. Can you blame them? She replied. A few weeks ago you could barely operate a coffee machine. Now you are rewriting their computer programs and having telepathic conversations with their leader. That would frighten anyone. But I am still me, Tejo insisted. I still miss hygiene. I still worry about Dongwook. I still remember working on the mining station. Are you sure about that? Myung asked gently. When was the last time you thought about your old life without someone else bringing it up first? Tejo tried to remember, and realized with shock that he had not thought about his girlfriend or his friend in days. His old life seemed distant and unimportant compared to the vast knowledge and power flowing through his mind. I am losing myself, he whispered. Maybe, Myung said. Or maybe you are becoming who you were always meant to be. That night, Tejo had a dream that felt more like a memory. He was standing in a small Korean village, but it was not the modern Korea he knew. This was an older time when houses were made of wood and clay, and people worked the fields with simple tools. In the dream, lights came down from the sky. Not harsh mechanical lights like human aircraft, but soft, warm glows that pulsed with life. Beings emerged from the lights, tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like starlight. They moved among the villagers, touching some and leaving others untouched. When Tejo woke, he knew he had seen the truth of his heritage. His great-grandmother had been one of the chosen ones, marked by the progenitors for reasons that were only now becoming clear. The abilities awakening in him were not a random mutation but a carefully planned gift, left behind by beings who had known that someday their legacy would be needed. The question was, needed for what? The answer to Tejo's question came sooner than anyone expected, and it came with terror. Tejo was working in the ship's main computer core, helping to optimize the navigation systems. When every alarm on the ship began screaming at once, the gentle musical tones that usually announced ship communications were replaced by harsh, urgent signals that made his newly sensitive hearing ache. High Matriarch Lyra Voss's voice echoed through the corridors, speaking in rapid Valthani. Through their telepathic connection, Tejo understood her words even before the translation came through the ship's computers. All warriors to battle stations. All civilians to protected areas. The Devourers have found us. Tejo ran to the command center, where he found chaos. Valthani crew members moved with practiced efficiency, but he could sense their fear through the ship's collective consciousness. On the main viewing screen, space around Earth looked wrong. Areas of perfect blackness moved between the stars, and wherever they passed, the stars went out. What are those things? Dr. Myung asked. She and several other selected humans had also made their way to the command center. The reason we are dying, the matriarch replied grimly. The reason, The progenitors disappeared. The reason we needed to find humans. The black areas in space were not empty. They were full of ships, but ships unlike anything in Tejo's worst nightmares. These vessels seemed to be made of darkness itself, twisted shapes that hurt to look at directly. They moved with purpose toward Earth, leaving trails of absolute void behind them. The Devourers consume life force, Dr. Nix Thorne explained as she activated the ship's defensive systems. They are parasites that feed on the energy that makes living beings alive. They have been moving across the galaxy for millions of years, leaving dead worlds in their wake. How many are there? Kang Jae-sung asked. His enhanced spatial awareness was giving him information that the ship's sensors could not provide. Too many, the matriarch said. Our entire fleet numbers only 30 ships. They have brought hundreds. Tejo watched the tactical display and felt sick. The Valthani were powerful, with technology far beyond human understanding, but they were vastly outnumbered. Worse, their ships were clearly not designed for this kind of battle. They were exploration vessels and colony ships, not warships. We have to protect Earth, Tejo said. My people cannot defend themselves against this. We will try, the matriarch promised, but you must understand, this is why we came to your world. We knew the Devourers were following us. We hoped to create hybrid offspring who might have the power to fight them before they arrived. But we are not ready, Dr. Myung said. The awakening process takes time. We are stronger than we were, but we are still mostly human. Then we must accelerate the process, Dr. Thorne said. It is dangerous, but it may be our only chance. The battle began as the Valthani fleet moved to intercept the Devourer ships before they could reach Earth. Tejo watched through the ship's sensors as energy beams lanced across the darkness, striking the alien vessels, but the Devourer ships seemed to absorb the attacks, growing larger and darker with each hit. Our weapons are feeding them, the matriarch realized with horror. They consume energy of all kinds. On Earth, human governments were scrambling to respond to the crisis. The planet's defense satellites and orbital weapons platforms opened fire on the approaching darkness. But their attacks had no more effect than the Valthani weapons. If anything, they seemed to make the Devourers stronger. There has to be something we can do, Tejo said. He felt helpless watching his home world prepare for annihilation. There is, Dr. Thorne said, but it requires you to fully activate your progenitor heritage. The process could kill you, or it could transform you into something that is no longer recognizably human. What choice do I have? Tejo replied. If I do nothing, everyone I have ever cared about will die. The activation process took place in the ship's most secure medical bay. Tejo lay on a table surrounded by machines that hummed with power. The matriarch stood beside him, her hand on his forehead, using their telepathic connection to guide him through the transformation. Remember who you are, she whispered as energy flowed through his body. Hold on to your human heart. No matter what else changes. The pain was beyond description. Every cell in Tejo's body felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt. His consciousness expanded until he could feel every living thing on the ship, then on Earth, then across the solar system. Knowledge flooded his mind, memories that belonged to beings who had died before his species evolved. When it was over, Tejo was no longer entirely human. His body looked the same, but his eyes now glowed with the same inner light as the Valthani. He could see across the electromagnetic spectrum, perceive the quantum fluctuations that held reality together, and touch the fundamental forces that governed the universe. More importantly, he understood that they were not evil in the way humans understood evil. They were a corruption, a mistake made by the progenitors in their final days. Originally, they had been progenitors themselves, but they had tried to transcend physical existence by consuming the life force of other beings. The process had driven them mad and turned them into parasites that could never be satisfied. They can be stopped, Tejo said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. But not by weapons. They feed on energy. We have to give them something they cannot digest. What the matriarch asked. Love, Tejo said. Compassion. The emotional connections between living beings. The Devourers lost those feelings when they became parasites. They cannot process positive emotions without being reminded of what they used to be. Working quickly, Tejo began modifying the ship's communication systems. Instead of broadcasting energy weapons, he would broadcast the collected emotional experiences of every living being on the ship. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one that made sense based on his new understanding. The other selected humans helped him. Their own awakening abilities complementing his. Dr. Mayung processed the emotional data at superhuman speeds, while Kang Jae-sung helped coordinate the broadcast to reach every Devourer ship simultaneously. As the modified transmission reached the Devourer fleet, something extraordinary happened. The dark ships began to slow, then stop. On the main viewing screen, Tejo could see them more clearly now, and he realized they were not ships at all. They were the transformed bodies of ancient progenitors, grown to enormous size and twisted by their hunger. The broadcast of positive emotions was having an effect. Some of the Devourers began to change, their dark holes lightening as they remembered what they had once been. But others fought against the memories, becoming even more aggressive and desperate. It is working on some of them, the matriarch observed. But not all. The ones who resist have been corrupted too long, Taeho realized. They would rather die than face what they have become. The battle entered a new phase as the Devourer fleet split into two groups. Those who were being restored to their original nature began to withdraw from Earth, but those who remained corrupted pressed their attack with renewed fury. We need more power, Taeho said. The emotional broadcast is not strong enough to reach them all. Then we give them everything, the matriarch said. She moved to the communication controls and began expanding the signal to include not just their ship but the entire Valthani fleet. One by one, the other Valthani ships joined the broadcast, adding their own emotional experiences to the transmission. The collective memory of an entire civilization flowed across space toward the Devourers. Stories of love and loss, hope and despair, triumph and tragedy. On Earth, something unexpected happened. Humans began to add their own voices to the broadcast. Taeho's friend Dongwook, working frantically at his communication station, had figured out how to connect Earth's communication networks to the alien transmission. Billions of human voices joined the chorus, sharing their emotions with beings they could not see or understand. The effect was overwhelming. Even the most corrupted Devourers began to change, their twisted forms slowly returning to something resembling their original progenitor shapes. The darkness between the stars began to lift as they remembered what it felt like to create instead of consume, to love instead of devour. But the process was not without cost. Many of the restored progenitors could not bear the weight of what they had done during their time as devour. They chose to end their existence rather than live with the memory of the worlds they had destroyed. When the battle was over, only a handful of the original Devourer fleet remained. These few had been completely restored to their progenitor nature, and they approached the Valthani fleet peacefully. We remember now, their leader broadcast to the assembled ships. We remember what we were, what we lost, and what we became. We cannot undo the damage we have caused, but we can ensure it never happens again. Taeho, still glowing with progenitor energy, served as a translator between the restored beings and the Valthani. The ancient enemies began to work together, sharing knowledge and resources to help heal the wounds left by millions of years of conflict. But even as this new alliance formed, Taeho knew that his greatest challenge still lay ahead. He had saved Earth and helped restore the Devourers, but in doing so, he had become something that was no longer entirely human. He would have to find a way to return to his old life while carrying the power and responsibility of his progenitor heritage. Looking down at Earth through the ship's viewing screen, he wondered if Hyjin would still recognize him, or if Dongwook would still want to be his friend. He had gained the power to reshape reality itself, but he feared he might have lost the simple human connections that had once made his life meaningful. The victory against the Devourers had saved Earth, but it was only the beginning of a larger crisis. In the days that followed the battle, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Other Devourer fleets were attacking star systems throughout known space, and not all civilizations had been as fortunate as Earth and the Valthani. Taeho stood in the command center, his transformed consciousness allowing him to process information from dozens of sources simultaneously. The restored progenitors had shared their knowledge of the galaxy, and the scope of the threat was staggering. There were hundreds of Devourer fleets scattered across the stars, each one capable of consuming entire worlds. We cannot save them, or, High Matriarch Lyra Voss said sadly. Even with our combined fleets, we do not have the numbers to fight so many enemies. Then we need to become stronger, Taeho replied. The progenitor abilities are the only thing that can stop them. Permanently, we need to awaken more humans. Dr. Nyx Thorne had been studying the transformation process that had changed Taeho and the other selected humans. The genetic markers exist in roughly 1% of the human population, she reported. That could be millions of individuals. But the awakening process is dangerous. Many will not survive it, and those who do survive may lose their humanity entirely, Dr. Myong added. Her own transformation had enhanced her intelligence to incredible levels, but she sometimes struggled to relate to people who thought at normal human speeds. Taeho knew the risks better than anyone. Since his full awakening, he had difficulty remembering what it felt like to be an ordinary human. His thoughts moved at light speed, processing vast amounts of information every second. He could reshape matter with his mind, communicate across interstellar distances, and perceive the fundamental structure of reality itself. But the power came with a price. He was losing his emotional connections to his old life. When he thought about Hyjin, he felt only a distant fondness, like remembering a childhood toy. His friendship with Dongwook seemed trivial compared to the cosmic responsibilities he now carried. There has to be another way, he said, fighting to hold on to his fading humanity. A way to awaken the abilities without losing what makes us human. The matriarch approached him, her ancient eyes full of concern. You are changing too quickly, she said through their telepathic link. The transformation that should have taken years is happening in weeks. Your human mind is not adapting to the new capabilities. I can handle it, Taeho insisted, but even as he spoke, he felt another piece of his original personality slip away. No, you cannot, she said firmly, and neither can the others. Dr. Myung has not slept in 4 days because she finds human dreams boring. Kong Jae-sung has started treating other people like chess pieces to be moved around a board. You are all losing yourselves. The crisis deepened when 3 more selected humans suffered complete mental breakdowns. Their enhanced abilities had developed too rapidly, overwhelming their human consciousness with godlike power they could not control. They had to be placed in medical stasis to prevent them from accidentally destroying the ship. We need to slow down the process, Dr. Thorne concluded after examining the affected humans. But the galaxy does not have time for a gradual awakening. More worlds are falling to the devourers every day. It was then that one of the restored progenitors, a being who called himself Elder Zeph, proposed a radical solution. Unlike the others of his kind, he had retained more of his original memories from before the corruption. There is a way to accelerate the awakening while preserving human consciousness, he told the assembled leaders. But it requires a sacrifice that few would be willing to. The victory against the Devourers had saved Earth, but it was only the beginning of a larger crisis. In the days that followed the battle, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Other Devourer fleets were attacking star systems throughout known space, and not all civilizations had been as fortunate as Earth, and the Valthani Toho stood in the command center, his transformed consciousness allowing him to process information from dozens of sources simultaneously. The restored progenitors had shared their knowledge of the galaxy, and the scope of the threat was staggering. There were hundreds of Devourer fleets scattered across the stars, each one capable of consuming entire worlds. We cannot save them, All High Matriarch Lyra Voss said sadly. Even with our combined fleets, we do not have the numbers to fight so many enemies. Then we need to become stronger, Taeho replied. The progenitor abilities are the only thing that can stop them, permanently. We need to awaken more humans. Dr. Nixthorne had been studying the transformation process that had changed Taeho and the other selected humans. The genetic markers exist in roughly 1% of the human population. She reported that could be millions of individuals. But the awakening process is dangerous. Many will not survive it, and those who do survive may lose their humanity entirely, Dr. Myung added. Her own transformation had enhanced her intelligence to incredible levels, but she sometimes struggled to relate to people who thought at normal human speeds. Taeho knew the risks better than anyone. Since his full awakening, he had difficulty remembering what it felt like to be an ordinary human. His thoughts moved at light speed, processing vast amounts of information every second. He could reshape matter with his mind, communicate across interstellar distances, and perceive the fundamental structure of reality itself. But the power came with a price. He was losing his emotional connections to his old life. When he thought about Hyjin, he felt only a distant fondness, like remembering a childhood toy. His friendship with Dongwook seemed trivial compared to the cosmic responsibilities he now carried. There has to be another way, he said, fighting to hold on to his fading humanity. A way to awaken the abilities without losing what makes us human. The matriarch approached him, her ancient eyes full of concern. You are changing too quickly, she said, through their telepathic link. The transformation that should have taken years is happening in weeks. Your human mind is not adapting to the new capabilities. I can handle it, Taeho insisted, but even as he spoke, he felt another piece of his original personality slip away. No, you cannot, she said firmly, and neither can the others. Dr. Myung has not slept in 4 days because she finds human dreams boring. Kong Jae-sung has started treating other people like chess pieces to be moved around a board. You are all losing yourselves. The crisis deepened when 3 more selected humans suffered complete mental breakdowns. Their enhanced abilities had developed too rapidly, overwhelming their human consciousness with godlike power they could not control. They had to be placed in medical stasis to prevent them from accidentally destroying the ship. We need to slow down the process, Dr. Thorne concluded after examining the affected humans. But the galaxy does not have time for a gradual awakening. More worlds are falling to the Devourers every day. It was then that one of the restored progenitors, a being who called himself Elder Zeph, proposed a radical solution. Unlike the others of his kind, he had retained more of his original memories from before the corruption. There is a way to accelerate the awakening while preserving human consciousness, he told the assembled leaders. But it requires a sacrifice that few would be willing to make. Elder Zeph explained that during the original progenitor civilization, they had developed a bonding process that allowed 2 beings to share consciousness while maintaining their individual identities. It was how they had created stable hybrid offspring with other species across the galaxy. The process requires complete trust and emotional connection between the bonded pair, he said. One being serves as an anchor holding onto the memories and personality of the other while they undergo transformation. But the anchor must be willing to share all of their experiences, including their deepest fears and most cherished memories. Taeho understood immediately what this meant. You want me to bond with a matriarch? It is the logical choice, Elder Zeph replied. You already share a telepathic connection, and she has the strength and experience to serve as your anchor. But the bonding will permanently link your consciousness with hers. You will never again be completely separate beings. The matriarch was quiet for a long moment. There are other considerations, she said finally. The bonding process would make it possible for us to have offspring who carry both human and Valthani traits. These children would be born with awakened abilities but stable personalities. Is that what you want? Taeho asked her directly. Not what your people need, but what you personally want. Through their mental link, he felt her answer before she spoke it aloud. She was tired of being alone, tired of carrying the weight of leadership without anyone who truly understood her burden. The idea of sharing her consciousness with someone who could match her thoughts and feelings was deeply appealing. Yes, she said simply, I want this. The bonding ceremony took place in the ship's most sacred chamber, a room where the Valthani stored the genetic memories of their entire species. Taeho and the matriarch lay on platforms surrounded by crystalline structures that hummed with stored life energy. Elders F guided the process, using ancient progenitor techniques to carefully merge their consciousness while preserving their individual identities. Taeho felt the matriarch's memories flowing into his mind, 800 years of experiences that should have overwhelmed any human brain, but instead of being crushed by the weight of her memories, he found them organizing themselves alongside his own. Her loneliness became his loneliness, her determination became his determination. Her love for her people became his love for both their species. At the same time, she absorbed his human experiences. She felt what it was like to grow up in a small apartment, to work with his hands, to worry about money and dream of simple happiness. She experienced his love for Hai-Jin and his friendship with Dongwook as if they were her own relationships when the bonding was complete. They were still two separate beings, but they were also something new. They could communicate without words, share thoughts and emotions instantly, and support each other through the continuing transformation process. More importantly, the bonding had stabilized Taeho's awakening abilities. With the matriarch serving as his anchor, he could access his full progenitor powers without losing his human identity. He was still the mechanic from the mining station, but he was also something far greater. How do you feel? Dr. Thorne asked after the ceremony. Complete, Taeho replied, and the matriarch nodded in agreement. Using the knowledge gained from their successful bonding, they began the process of awakening other humans across Earth, but instead of forcing rapid transformation, they paired each candidate with a Valthani partner who could serve as their anchor. Dr. Myung bonded with a Valthani scientist named Kith Varan, stabilizing her enhanced intelligence while preserving her curiosity and creativity. Kong Jae-soo partnered with a military commander called Darathes, allowing him to develop his tactical abilities without losing his compassion for the people under his command. The process was not without failures. Some humans could not establish the necessary emotional connection with their Valthani partners. Others found the sharing of consciousness too invasive and chose to remain unchanged. But for those who succeeded, the results were remarkable. Within weeks, Earth had hundreds of awakened humans working alongside their Valthani partners. They could operate advanced technology, communicate across space, and fight the Devourers with weapons made of pure thought and will. But the real test came when a massive Devourer fleet, larger than the one that had attacked Earth, appeared in the Proxima Centauri system. The human colony there had less than a day before the parasites would consume every living thing on the planet. This is our chance to prove that the bonding process works, Taeho told the assembled fleet. We cannot save everyone in the galaxy, but we can start with our neighbors. The combined human Valthani fleet arrived at Proxima Centauri just as the Devourers began their attack on the colony. But this time, the defenders were ready. Instead of trying to fight the parasites with conventional weapons, they used the emotional broadcasting technique that had worked at Earth, amplified by the bonded consciousness of hundreds of awakened humans and Valthani. The effect was even more powerful than before. The love and connection shared between the bonded pairs created a resonance that the Devourers could not resist. One by one, the corrupted progenitors began to remember what they had lost, and chose restoration over destruction. It is working, the matriarch said through her link with Taeho, but we need to be careful. Each battle weakens us as well as them. She was right. The emotional broadcasting required the bonded pairs to expose their deepest feelings to hostile alien minds. Some of the human Valthani partnerships were strained by the experience, and a few broke apart entirely when the humans could not handle the intensity of the connection. As they returned to Earth after the successful mission, Taeho realized that they had found a way to fight the Devourers, but it would require sacrifices from everyone involved. The awakened humans would have to give up their purely human existence, and the Valthani would have to share their ancient loneliness with younger, more emotional partners. Are we doing the right thing? He asked the matriarch as they stood together on the observation deck, watching Earth grow larger through the transparent aluminum. We are doing the necessary thing, she replied. Whether it is right or wrong will be determined by what our bonded children choose to do with the power we are giving them. Taeho nodded, knowing that their strange love story was just the beginning of a much larger transformation that would affect both their species for generations to come. They had found a way to fight the ancient enemy, but in doing so, they were creating something entirely new, something that was neither fully human nor fully Valthani. The question was whether this new hybrid civilization would be strong enough to face whatever other threats lurked in the darkness between the stars. 6 months after the first awakening, Tahoe stood on the bridge of a ship unlike any that had ever existed. The vessel was a fusion of human engineering and Valthani technology, built by bonded pairs working in perfect harmony. Its hull was organic metal that could repair itself, and its consciousness was a blend of artificial intelligence and living thought. Through his connection with High Matriarch Lyra Voss, he could feel the emotions of every bonded pair in there. Growing fleet, humans and Valthani working together, their minds linked in ways that created something greater than either species could achieve. Alone, but today would test everything they had built. Long-range sensors had detected the largest devourer fleet ever encountered, moving toward the galactic core where billions of inhabited worlds clustered together like stars in a crown. If this fleet reached the core worlds, the resulting devastation would end civilization as they knew it. "The fleet is massive," reported Dr. Myung, now serving as the combined fleet's chief science officer. Her bond with Kith Varen had enhanced both their abilities beyond what either could have achieved alone. "Our estimates suggest over 1,000 devourer entities, some of them the size of small moons." "How is that possible?" asked Kong Jae-sung from his position at the tactical station. His partnership with Dareth S had made him one of the most effective military commanders in known space. They had been combining, Elder Zeph explained through the ship's communication system. The restored progenitor had become their advisor on ancient threats. "The corruption spreads faster when devourers merge together. They are becoming something even worse than what we faced before." Tahoe felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In 6 months he had gone from being a simple mechanic to leading a coalition that spanned multiple star systems. The awakened humans now numbered in the thousands, each one bonded with a Valthani partner and capable of wielding power that could reshape matter itself. "Can we stop them with emotional broadcasting?" the matriarch asked through their mental link. "Not this time," Tahoe replied. "The merged devourers have lost too much of their original identity. They are pure hunger now, beyond the reach of memory or compassion." The assembled fleet commanders, both human and Valthani, waited for his decision. They had learned to trust his judgment, but this situation was beyond anything they had faced before. "We need a different approach," Tahoe said aloud. "We cannot restore them to what they were, so we need to offer them something else." "What could we possibly offer to beings who consume entire worlds?" asked Captain Rodriguez, who now commanded a human Valthani hybrid vessel. Tahoe closed his eyes and reached deep into the progenitor memories he had inherited. Somewhere in the vast library of ancient knowledge, there had to be an answer. He felt the matriarch supporting him, her 8 centuries of experience, helping him process information that would have burned out a purely human mind. "Transcendence," he said suddenly. "The devourers became parasites because they tried to transcend physical existence by consuming others. But there is another way." Elder Zeph's voice carried new interest. "Explain." "Instead of fighting them, we help them achieve what they originally wanted. We show them how to transcend without destruction, how to become beings of pure energy without losing their souls. That is incredibly dangerous," Dr. Thorne warned from her research vessel. "If we make a mistake, we could create something even worse than the devourers, and if we do nothing, billions will die." Tahoe replied, "We have to try." The plan that emerged was the most ambitious undertaking in galactic history. Every bonded pair in the fleet would link their consciousness together, creating a network of minds that spanned light years. This collective consciousness would reach out to the devourer fleet and offer them a gift: the knowledge of how to transcend properly, without corruption or hunger. "The risk to our people is enormous," the matriarch said during the final planning the session. "The devourers reject our offer and attack the network directly. The psychic feedback could kill every bonded pair in the fleet. Then we make sure they do not reject it," Tahoe replied. The final confrontation took place in empty space between star systems, far from any inhabited worlds. The combined human Valthani fleet spread out in a formation that maximized their psychic resonance, while the devourer swarm approached like a tide of living darkness. Tahoe and the matriarch stood at the center of the network, their consciousness serving as the focal point for thousands of linked minds. Around them, bonded pairs from dozens of worlds added their strength to the collective effort. "Begin the Transcendence Protocol," Tahoe commanded. The network activated, and suddenly every mind in the fleet was connected to every other mind. Human creativity flowed alongside Valthani wisdom. Love and hope mixed with ancient knowledge and hard-won experience. The collective consciousness became something beautiful and powerful, a demonstration of what sapient beings could achieve when they worked together. This consciousness reached out toward the devourer fleet, not as an attack but as an offering. Instead of trying to force the corrupted progenitors to remember what they had been, the network showed them what they could become. The response was immediate and violent. The devourers recoiled from the contact, their hunger-driven minds unable to process the concept of willing cooperation. But Tahoe persisted, supported by the love and determination of thousands of bonded pairs. "We understand your pain," he projected toward the lead devourer, a being so corrupted that it barely retained any trace of its original form. "You sought transcendence but found only endless hunger. Let us show you another way." For a moment, that lasted an eternity, the network and the Devourer fleet were locked in psychic contact. Taeho felt the incredible anguish of beings who had destroyed entire civilizations in their desperate search for fulfillment. They were not evil, just broken beyond repair by their own desperate choices. But within that brokenness, he found something else, a tiny spark of what they had originally been. Beings who had once created beauty and sought knowledge, who had loved and hoped and dreamed before they were consumed by their own ambitions. You can let go, Taeho whispered across the psychic. Linked, you do not have to carry this hunger anymore. We can show you how to become what you always wanted to be. The transformation began with the smallest devourers first. Instead of trying to consume the network's energy, they allowed it to flow through them, purifying the corruption that had twisted their consciousness for millions of years. One by one, they began to dissolve into pure energy, not dying but transcending to a higher state of existence. The larger devourers fought against the process, too consumed by their hunger to accept the offer of redemption. But as more of their companions transcended, the collective weight of their shared consciousness began to shift. The network of bonded minds showed them that true transcendence came not from taking but from giving, not from consuming but from creating. The largest devourer, the one that had absorbed hundreds of others, was the last to change. It fought desperately against the transcendence process, trying to maintain its physical form and its endless hunger. But in the end, even it could not resist the combined love and determination of the network. As it began to dissolve, the entity sent one final message. To Taeho, we remember now. We remember what we lost. Thank you for showing us the way home. When the process was complete, the Devourer fleet had vanished. In its place was a new form of consciousness, beings of pure energy who existed beyond physical limitations. They were no longer the progenitors who had once ruled the galaxy, but they were no longer the devourers who had terrorized it either. They were something new, something that could create and nurture rather than consume and destroy. The transcended beings spoke one last time to the network before departing for dimensions beyond physical space. The threat is ended, they said, but new challenges will come. The galaxy needs guardians who can bridge the gap between matter and energy, between creation and transcendence. You who are bonded together have become those guardians. As the network dissolved and individual consciousness returned to normal, Taeho found himself back on the bridge of his ship, still connected to the matriarch but once again aware of his separate identity. It is finished, she said through their link. No, Taeho replied, looking out at the stars. It is just beginning. In the months that followed, the bonded pairs returned to their home worlds as heroes and teachers. The threat of the Devourers was ended, but the universe was full of other challenges that required the unique abilities of human Valthani partnerships. Taeho returned to Earth, where he was reunited with Hyjin and Dongwook. The reunion was bittersweet. He was still recognizably himself, but he was also something more. His bond with the matriarch meant that he could never return to his old life completely. Hyjin understood, even though it hurt. You saved everyone, she told him. I cannot be angry about that. I still love you, Taeho said. And it was true. But his love was now part of a larger pattern, connected to his bond with the matriarch and his responsibility to the growing hybrid civilization. In the end, they found a new kind of relationship, one that honored what they had been while accepting what Taeho had become. Hyjin chose to undergo the awakening process herself, bonding with a young Valthani named Syl Thorn. Their partnership was different from the deep connection Taeho shared with the matriarch, but it was real and meaningful in its own way. Dongwook remained unchanged, choosing to stay fully human while serving as a liaison between the awakened and those who chose to remain as they were. Someone has to remember what we used to be, he said with a grin that reminded Taeho of their old friendship. The Valthani established permanent colonies in the solar system, while humans began to spread across the galaxy under the protection of their bonded partners. The children born from these unions were remarkable beings who could manipulate matter and energy from birth while retaining the emotional depth and creativity that made humanity special. Elder Zeph, the last of the original progenitors, chose to remain in physical form to guide the new civilization. You have accomplished something we never could, he told Taeho during one of their meetings. You have created a stable hybrid species that carries the best traits of multiple civilizations. What happens now? Taeho asked. Now you explore, Elder Zeph replied. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. There are other species who could benefit from what you have learned, other threats that will require the unique abilities of bonded minds. You have become the bridge between what was and what could be. Taeho stood with the matriarch on the observation deck of their ship, watching Earth turn slowly in the void. Children played in the corridors behind them, human and Valthani and hybrid offspring who would never know a universe where their species were separate. Do you regret it? The matriarch asked through their bond. The simple life you gave up? Taeho considered the question seriously. He thought about the quiet satisfaction of fixing machines, the uncomplicated love he had shared with Hyjin, the easy friendship he had enjoyed with Dongwook. Those things were still part of him, but they were no longer the limits of his existence. No, he said finally. I was chosen for this, even before I understood what it meant. The boy who fixed air recyclers was always meant to become something more. The ship turned away from Earth, heading toward the galactic rim where new adventures and challenges awaited. Behind them, the solar system bustled with activity as human and Valthani colonies worked together to build a better future. Ahead lay the infinite darkness between stars, no longer empty but full of possibility. The age of separation was ending, and the age of unity had begun. And at the center of it all, a simple mechanic and an ancient queen shared a love that had transformed two civilizations and created something entirely new in the galaxy. The stars were waiting, and they were ready to meet them together.